Again, everyone hopping on today. So today is the last session of our Azure 1, 2, 3 series. Thanks to Simon and the Microsoft team and our marketing team for helping put together a great series around Azure for education institutions. The last session we have today is going to be focused on security, identity, and access for students and faculty. For those that haven't attended my sessions in the past, my name is Rich Lilly from Netrix. Netrix is a solutions integrator in central region of the U.S., covering education, corporate accounts, etc. Happy to be presenting, I think, my third or fourth session on Azure. And my role at Netrix is a cloud and data center evangelist. So my goal is to help customers and support Microsoft and our sales team and customers understand various technologies around the Microsoft stack, including Azure, the Enterprise Mobility Suite, which we'll be talking about today, amongst System Center, Windows Server, etc. So couple shameless plugs for myself. You can find my blog that talks about a lot of the things we're covering today at www.acloudabove.com. You can find me on LinkedIn at Rich04, LinkedIn/Rich04, and you can always find me on Twitter, hopefully saying positive things at Rich Lilly. So for today's agenda, we're going to be talking about the shift in your institution perimeter. We'll kind of dive into identity-driven security, which is kind of the foundation for Microsoft's approach to enterprise security. We'll talk about managed mobile productivity, and then we'll kind of talk about the comprehensive platform, which is the Enterprise Mobility and Security Platform. So when we talk to a lot of institutions out there today, and we talk to, and look at the market trends, there's a lot of things we recognize around kind of the new mobile-first, cloud-first, users that are out there today. When you look at a lot of institutions and enterprises, we find that about 63% of data breaches are due to weak, default, or stolen passwords. Again, highlighting the fact that identity is really core. Gone are the days of typical intrusions from weak firewalls or open services, and more looking at identity through privilege escalation and leveraging credentials that have been exposed in various means and manners. Great example of this is Yahoo. Obviously, if you haven't seen the note, about 1 billion user identities yesterday were announced as breached by Yahoo. That's a separate breach from the 500 million that were previously exposed, I think, in 2012. One of the things you'll understand and hopefully learn about this from a Microsoft perspective is that their focus on enterprise security is really unmatched. Microsoft is committed in this year to spend $1 billion on enterprise security. That is one of the largest spends on IT security you'll see across any cloud provider. There's reason for that, though. Microsoft today protects approximately 1/4 of the world's data. It's a huge number. So, obviously their investments in enterprise security and their focus on enterprise security is really bar none to some of the other providers. Absolutely, more so than say Yahoo. What we're also finding in kind of this mobile-first world is a lot of institutions are finding that there's about 80% of their users are doing some sort of shadow IT. This could be, due to, unapproved SaaS applications. This could be, users going out and procuring applications or putting content on unapproved sources. So we're going to talk about how we can wrap our arms around some of that today. With the IT budget growth at such a low percentage, about 0.6% in 2016, we'll see what that looks like in the projected 2017. You have to do a lot more with a lot less, and we're going to kind of talk about how the EMS platform really helps from that perspective. So one of the things is, how do you keep up with, a lot of things that are out there in market today? Again, we see breaches from users. We see, securing devices. You want to be able to wrap your hands around applications and data. How do you effectively do that? Today we're going to kind of talk about how Microsoft has kind of 3 pillars around this enterprise mobility and security platform. One that's really focused on securing and protecting against new threats, zero-day attacks, breaches of identity, and things like that. We're also going to talk about how we can maximize the productivity experience for your students and faculty. And finally, we'll wrap with kind of talking about the overall comprehensive and integrated platform that's offered through EMS. So what is EMS? Again, we really look at, securing threats through identity-driven security, protecting without compromise, and then providing that comprehensive solution. Again, highlighting the fact that doing more with less is key, especially as, IT staffs are becoming more and more lean. Specifically, this is where the enterprise mobility plus security platform fits in. So when we start talking about identity-driven security, we kind of talked about the data breaches as well. The foundation of access is really identity. It's that thumbprint that recognizes who that user is. And not only who that user is, but what device they're on, if they're trusted, where are they coming in from, or have we seen that they've been a part of potentially abnormal or malicious type of activity. If you're not currently an Office 365 customer today, you'll note that there is what's called Azure Active Directory. And if you're an Office 365 customer today, you already have Azure Active Directory, whether you realize it or not. What's done is Microsoft implements a tool, or we implement a tool rather, that synchronizes your on-prem directory to Azure Active Directory. This directory is then used to connect to various other cloud SaaS app providers. Office 365 is one of the most common ones, but we can also integrate that identity with about 2,400 other third-party SaaS application vendors. This is really key because by housing that identity being your, AD being your single source of truth, means that we don't have to maintain disparate identity stores and various solutions. It really means that user's Active Directory ID, their fingerprint, really is how they access their authorization, what they're allowed to access to for anything. It means that you don't have to manage all these policies and things all over the place. This is done through a fairly simple connection through a service called Azure AD Connect. Used to be called DIR Sync or Azure AD Sync, but this one-way identity synchronization process is really key. We also talk about the concept of federation. If we've talked about, if you think about federation in the past, it typically required, deployment of services such as Active Directory Federation services, or services such as Ping Federate or Centrify. There's many other types of STS providers out there. There's also other options. So when we talk about things like ADFS, there is an overhead to deploy that. There is servers, there's maintenance, there's HA, there's DR. There's now even further options around federating with Azure Active Directory, allow us to really do a federation list model. We'll kind of talk about some of the pros and cons there as well. So identity is typically at the core of your business. You likely have maybe not thousands, but tens or hundreds of applications. Integrating those with a single core identity is really key. As I mentioned, when we talk about these SaaS app providers, if you're not integrating with AD, you're not federating in some manner with an Active Directory identity, you're really losing out on, having to manage these, again, disparate identity stores. Who, maintains and manages identity in Salesforce and Workday and Blackboard and Concur and, the thousands of other apps that, are out there in the market today. By driving that identity off of the core AD model, it allows us to really allow provisioning in an easy and quick manner, as well as deprovisioning of that access and the reverse type of scenario. We're also finding out that, again, the perimeter of identity is shifting. In the past, everyone was used to managing access based on their four walls. We'll call it a castle. But what slowly happened is with users working remote or off campus, or not on, campus networks, we need to be able to secure that identity, secure that user, no matter where they are. I equate this to kind of what was happening in the, I think, 1700s or so, where, that castle example, cannonballs started taking the castle walls down. That's very much so where a lot of organizations are at today. And certainly managing access at scale, depending on the size of your universities, when we start getting into the hundreds or thousands of users, that process can be fairly labor intensive. So minimizing that to a single plane is really, really key. As I talked about earlier, a lot of the breaches are really moving from more of an outside-in type of hack attack to more of a breach type of model. Breaching identity, privileged user escalation, things as such. So we're really going to talk about how some of the tools within this EMS platform really help you protect yourselves from those types of kind of inside attacks. There are really three steps to identity-driven security. When we take the cloud out of the mix, where a lot of organizations still are today, on premises, you assume a lot of the risk that comes along with protecting your resources. It's how you have resources published externally. It's how you have applications presented. It's all up to you to provide that level of protection. That is probably one of the most key parts, and really that's kind of your outside-in types of attacks. Now, what I'm going to kind of walk through today, some examples how you can leverage Microsoft to take on that first layer of attack. Consider Microsoft as that linebacker that's sitting in front of the quarterback, protecting you before we're even allowing traffic to pass to any of your networks or services. And the important point to make there is that, again, Microsoft's investment in enterprise security are just extremely vast. Today they go through something like 200 billion emails per year. Every day there's about 13 billion, that's not million, that's not thousand, that's billion authentications to Azure Active Directory. Microsoft has a strategic team called the Digital Crimes Unit, and their sole purpose is to leverage the data that's coming in from these various sources to help protect other tenants and users within their services. So again, their massive investments in enterprise security help really protect you from these different types of attacks. So we're going to kind of demonstrate some scenarios today in which Microsoft takes on that first risk before we even allow that traffic to come into your front door. It also allows us to really protect against user mistakes. So in this case, how do we really check if a user is in a compliant state? How do we make sure a device is healthy and meets our enterprise security policy? And how do we ensure that data activity on premises in the cloud is consistent and matches our governance and IT policies? And third, we're going to talk about detecting attacks before they cause damage. So there's various tools within EMS that really focus on looking at suspicious activity, abnormal activity, really defining what the norm is for a user, and being able to trigger alerts and actions based on abnormal type of activity. This is really how we proactively protect you against these types of attacks that are coming in. This is done in a handful of different ways. I'm going to demonstrate a couple of use cases for you today, but this is an example of using different conditions of access, or what's called conditional access within the EMS platform. These do things like look for location-based rules, health of device state, risk of the user and application, and general just risk of the session. Tools within EMS really do all of these things, and then we allow access. Again, if you think back to how your processes are today, are you actually performing all of these checks before allowing a user to connect? Whether it's non-sensitive or sensitive data, we want to be able to limit exposure to an institution. So one of the first places people ask about is gain visibility into my cloud apps. And a lot of institutions today, especially on the admin side or the faculty side, we find that a lot of user data can potentially find its way to cloud resources that aren't approved. So in this model, how do we really control that? We're going to talk a little bit today about a tool called Cloud App Security. We actually covered this in one of our previous sessions a bit as well. But we're going to kind of talk about how CAS really helps from a shadow IT discovery perspective, can help understand the risk profile of a user and what they're doing is risky, where they're coming in, what devices they're using. It also allows us to enforce policies for data control. Do I have student PHI data that's being uploaded to OneDrive for Business and then shared externally? With CAS, we can proactively identify that content and revert that action, so we're limiting our risk or exposure of potentially sensitive content. Again, that could be either malicious type of activity or a user just doesn't realize that what they're putting out there is public. So it kind of allows us to protect our users from themselves. We're then going to talk about how to prevent data leakage from mobile applications. So with Microsoft Intune being a mobile device management platform, we're going to talk about in a BYO model, which is extremely important in most institutions today, how you can protect your content on a mobile device. So that when I open up an institution email and I try to copy that content to a text message or copy it to a local browser, how we can enforce blocking that action, essentially ensuring that we are controlling data loss. And then on top of that, we can even provide file-level protection, where we can classify and label documents, protect that information, and be able to monitor and respond based on the activities that are occurring, down to the level of blocking screenshots and sharing and tagging documents with headers and watermarks to be able to protect that content. We'll also go a little bit today. I'm not going to demo much of ATA today. We had a separate session on that, but we'll kind of talk about how on-premises we can protect from these type of privilege escalation as well. So when we talk about the cloud, it's all kind of built into the SaaS service. But when we talk about on-prem, there's still, that hybrid identity, that on-prem identity we need to protect as well. So we'll kind of go into how we can leverage these tools to kind of protect you. So let's, rather than go through slides, we're going to go through actually a handful of examples of how we can really protect you in a handful of ways. So one of the first things I want to do is kind of set the stage for how identity is managed today. So if, whether you're an Office 365 customer or not, you have what is called Azure Active Directory. Oh, excuse me, I have the wrong tab here. So in Office 365, for anyone that has access, you'll likely recognize this portal. And you'll recognize that if I search for a user that's being synced already today, we have that identity that exists in that platform. What a lot of folks don't realize that this is all being synced from on-premises directory, but also we have access to this in other meaningful ways. So for instance, what this actually looks like is in the Azure portal here, you'll note that you actually have access to this identity. And this is actually where we truly control access to various resources as they exist in the cloud. So in this case, we'll go over to Azure AD and just to illustrate the point I just made here, we'll go search for that same user account. And you'll find that I've got many user accounts here. We'll find that my Rich Lilly user account here, we'll find different information about him. So, we'll see what he's signed into, in this case, not too many. We'll see group membership information, the profile of that user. But all of this information is used to determine things like access and creating groups around attributes and things like that there. The same thing would apply to, say, on-premises groups as well. So if I go back, we can see that, I've got the accessibility to my on-prem groups, which is very handy as we start talking about application access and provisioning. So one of the first things I like to show, especially if you're an Office 365 customer or a consumer of any Azure service, is a solution called Privileged Identity Management. And I believe Tom went through this in our session last week. So for anyone that couldn't attend, we'll just do a quick run through. What this allows me to do is request access for a right or a credential only when I need it. Gone are the days of having persistent, global admins in the cloud of Office 365, and now are the days of being able to provide access on demand, only for a short amount of time. That aligns with a concept called just enough access and just-in-time access. Essentially means that I only give credentials only when needed, and that everything I do during that period is going to be logged and tracked. So an example of what that looks like from a user perspective is I, as John Doe user, I have the wrong account here. We'll just kind of illustrate the first part of this here. Have the ability to request access to a different credential. Looks like I didn't license myself. So in this case, I have the right to go request Exchange administrator credentials in the cloud so that, when I need to troubleshoot an Exchange issue, I get that access only when I need it. And I only get it for 30 minutes so that, as I'm doing that activity, everything I do during that time frame with that elevated credential is logged and tracked. Now, the other important part that falls outside of EMS, or actually falls as part of kind of EMS, is the fact that Microsoft has now brought this on premises now as well. It's brought on premises through a tool of EMS called Microsoft Identity Manager and a tool called PAM, which is available with Server 2012 R2 or 2016. It's called Privileged Access Management. So everything I just quickly demoed for you from a cloud perspective is available on-prem. So again, think about how many domain admins you have today, especially if you have, a sizable IT staff. The fact that those domain admins really have access to just about everything. We'll consider them kind of godlike access. What if I could limit that exposure and say that user is always a domain user, but only has access when needed? When we talk about offboarding users and lifecycle management, that's really key to ensure that, the wrong person doesn't have the wrong rights. So something I won't be demoing today, but just something important to point out. We can also talk about kind of that identity-driven security. So again, we kind of talk about the fact that we're fingerprinting a user, and then Microsoft has this huge catalog of SaaS-based applications. So in this model, we have all these SaaS apps that Microsoft has in their catalog today. So if we go up to that application gallery in this case, we've already gone ahead and discovered what apps are out there today, and this can be done through various means. One of those methods is called Cloud App Discovery. This is an agent-based tool that allows us to check what SaaS apps are being used by our various users in the org. It allows us to really get a handle on what apps are out there and how heavily they're used. This is really the first stage to full identity integration. Now, when you look here, I'm obviously a fairly heavy Office 365 user, we may also see some other apps on here that I may choose to integrate identity. Let's just say, we'll take Box as an example. Let's just say you are a heavy Box user and not OneDrive for Business. If you don't have that federated today, that means that someone's managing identities and passwords within that platform. That means that when someone gets added or removed, someone has to go through that process. That's an example of just one application. Now what if we start spanning it out to 20 or 30 or 40 different applications? It means that there's a high risk of potential exposure if someone's not managing that identity. So the great thing is here, we can federate a lot of these applications directly with Azure AD, and we don't even need, potentially Active Directory Federation services. Microsoft has a catalog. I think it was close. It was about 300 off. They have about 2,780 applications in there today. And you recognize a lot of these applications, for the education institutions, you'll note that we have things like Blackboard integration. You may recognize some of the other apps that are on this list as well. Now, the nice thing is I can federate directly with those applications. And you can see I've got a handful of different apps that I've identified and federated with here as well. The very nice thing here as well is I've gone ahead and done that just from demo purposes with Salesforce. And I'll demo what that looks like from a Salesforce perspective in just a second. The nice thing about Salesforce is I can automatically provision and deprovision users based on the attributes of who they are, what they are within the organization. Now, one additional security measure, I talked about how Microsoft kind of takes on that first level of checking risk. I can enable policies that say always require MFA when off premises, especially for maybe a student admin application. I can also do things like say I can only trust access to this application from a trusted campus device or from a device enrolled in Intune. So, that may be your, Windows 10, faculty PCs, that may be mobile devices, but we only allow access from a trusted device. This is, again, taking that security to another level where, again, we're kind of taking that first, blocking approach if it doesn't simply meet that criteria. So I've already gone through and chosen a handful of applications to do just that with. One of the first here is, again, our Salesforce tenant. So I'm going to go ahead and look at our configuration here. I'm just going to get our tenant name so I can demonstrate that. Bear with me 1 second. So I've configured single sign-on. You can see we can do a couple different models here, but we'll focus just on the Azure AD single sign-on. So right now what happens is if I go to salesforce.com, launch a new browser here. What we'll see when I pop up that tenant ID, which can be accessible through an app UI or the Office 365 portal or accessed directly through the URL, which we'll do here. What you saw just happen there is it identified that we are syncing that ID with another provider. So in this case, we're actually just redirecting to Azure Active Directory. Actually, sorry, I chose the wrong account here. We'll try that again very quickly. So in this model, we're going to do the same thing in an in-private browser since I already have another session open. And we're going to see it's going to prompt me to log in. This is just redirected to Azure AD. Today, for you that may redirect to ADFS or Ping, for instance. So in this model, I'm going to go ahead and log in with my credentials. No different than how I log into my campus PCs today. And you're going to see that it actually prompts me for multi-factor authentication. On my mobile device, which you can't see, I just got prompted for an approve or deny request. That can also be a phone call or a text message. I'm going to hit approve there. And we're going to see it's going to then continue me into the Salesforce portal. That's an example of just user-driven security, saying that we don't recognize you're coming in from a campus location, so we're going to require a second factor of authentication. We can also do this in other manners. So, for instance, we can do this with Office 365 services, such as SharePoint Online and OneDrive for Business. Microsoft has also lit this up for Exchange Online as well as Yammer as of recent. So I actually have a tenant here that I'm not a member of that domain. And what happens when I try to go to SharePoint Online is we recognize and we pick up that that device is not joined to the network. So you can see here that, again, that linebacker approach, we're not a part of the domain and we're not enrolled in Intune for this tenant. So in this case, we're going to block access. Kind of just shows that we are doing kind of all these various checks before even allowing access to this application. Now, when we have all these applications, Microsoft has a single portal I can publish these out to. This is called the My Apps portal. You'll also see access to these applications in Office 365 as well. So for instance, if I go up to Office 365 and we go to My Apps, you actually see not only my Office 365 apps that I have access to, but on the bottom in a second, you're going to see all of my apps published from a cloud SaaS app provider as well. So here we've got, our cloud apps such as Cloud App Security, Salesforce, and a handful of others, Twitter being one of them as well as I'm publishing some on-prem apps, which I'll talk about in just a second. So another example of an app that maybe doesn't support federation is for me to be able to distribute a credential to multiple users. A great example of this is having a campus social media account. I love to show this demo because one of the things, if you haven't read through any of the recent breach reports, the Department of Justice actually had a Twitter account where they were exchanging username and password information for their Twitter account on a piece of paper. So what happens when that person leaves and no one has the ability or thought to block them? In this model, it really means that they can go out there and post anything they want. What actually happened in the DOJ case is that someone went out and posted in their Twitter page that the stock market crashed and Obama is dead. That's a very simple example, but again, as we start talking about the impact of your campus social accounts, that can be a very good or a bad thing. The nice thing is I can distribute those credentials. So when I hit Twitter here, we'll have to circle back on that one. It looks like I just updated my machine, so it may have broken something. But when I hit Twitter, what you'd actually see is it opens up the Twitter page, injects the username and password into that view, then allows me immediate access into that application without ever exposing the password of that account. Very good way of kind of distributing a one-to-many credential. What also happens here is I also have the ability to publish out on-premises applications as well. So I'm going to, just open up another browser here. We'll do this again. So in this model, we'll go ahead and go back to the same My Apps portal, and we're also publishing on-premises apps. So today where you may be publishing apps through, say, a reverse proxy or through some type of edge device, firewall, etc. Again, you're taking on the first risk of potential attackers trying to hit your edge. What we can do is actually we can remove that altogether and leverage a service called Azure AD Application Proxy. This allows us to publish on-premises HTTP or HTTPS solutions without exposing anything at your edge. Microsoft essentially takes on that initial authentication and then passes that through an outbound-only connection from your network. So, again, there's zero exposure on your edge from an HTTP service. So now that we're in the right portal here, I'm just going to go ahead and hit Twitter just to kind of circle back on that example. So in this, you'll see I also have MFA turned on for our social account. Because I'm coming in from off campus, we're going to ask for another approval. So in this case, I'm going to hit approve. What you're going to see in the top middle of the screen is that it's going to inject the username and password in the Twitter login fields without exposing that to the user. There we go, username and password, and now we're on the corporate Twitter. Very quick and easy example of that one-to-many type of credential. Now, in addition, we also have other on-premises service published here as well. So, for instance, in my portal, I've got an app such as my Service Manager portal. So in this model, again, I have no VPN, so you see no Cisco AnyConnect or Juniper client here. This happens to have basic authentication in, so I do have to log in once here. So in this model, it'll take a minute or so to come up, but you'll actually see our on-premises portal published without actually exposing any of that to the web. Our IS server is a little bit tapped, so it'll take probably about 10 seconds or so to come up. But both of these really illustrate the way in which we can publish both cloud SaaS-based applications as well as internally delivered SaaS applications by Microsoft taking on that first check of those different conditions of risk. And again, that catalog is fairly vast today, about 2,700 applications. Also, if you have an application that's not in that catalog today, Microsoft will allow you to dynamically discover fields on user login and password pages to automatically populate those apps. And as I was talking there, you can obviously see that my request came in there as well. So again, kind of the net here is really to highlight the fact that, identity integration from AD to Azure AD and then all those apps to Azure AD, and again, I should highlight as I disable a user account, delete a user account, all the access from the relative apps are deprovisioned as well. Again, that allows us to really make sure that really this is our only single plane of access for enterprise content. Therefore, when a user is disabled or deleted, it allows us to ensure that no access is persisted across the various platforms. All right, so the next thing I want to kind of talk through quickly here was going to be conditional access in the Azure AD App Proxy. Actually, I talked about that just a second ago. We already demoed multi-factor authentication. Let's move on to password reset. So password reset is a publicly available tool today. You do have to be licensed for the EMS or Azure AD Premium SKU. This allows my students or faculty to reset their passwords anywhere from any device. So in this model, let's just say that I've forgotten my password. So in this model, I would simply go into the tool here. I'd enter my alias, which is my email address. We're going to go ahead and try to reset the password. It's going to asked me to ensure that I'm not a robot, and I never entered this correctly in demo, so I may have to do this once more. What's actually doing in the back end is it recognizes this as part of my Netrix tenant. It's checking for a license and now saying, okay, we can move forward to the password reset. Now in this model, maybe I'm one day past my password expiration. I need to reset my password so I can get back to work or get back to doing things I need to from a class perspective. So in this model, we can say that I forgot my password. There's also an option here for a password unlock or an account unlock, so we can say I got a new iPad and I fat fingered my password 5 times. In that model, that user can unlock themselves without calling into the help desk. And that's really a key point because about 30 to 40% of all help desk tickets are just due to password reset. So I'm going to say I forgot my password here, and we require one-factor authentication to reset this because, again, that password isn't valid. That can be email, a text, or a phone call. So we're going to do just a quick phone call. So in this model, I'm going to enter my phone number, 5847. We'll do a quick phone call. And what you'll see pop up in just a second is, or you'll hear rather, is my phone's going to start ringing and I'm going to get prompted to validate my identity. So in that case, I'm getting a phone call, which it's on my vibrate so you can't hear, but I'm going to go ahead and validate that by just hitting pound when I get that phone call. And then it's going to continue us over to the password reset page. Now, when I enter my password here, we're going to do dummy password here. In this model, 2 very important things. This always adheres to your local group policy settings. You don't have to set up separate settings that match your 10 password policies around fine-grained policies, expiration, things like that. The other important point is as soon as I hit finish here, which I'm not going to do because I don't want to reset my password, we'll, within under 500 milliseconds, sync that password back to on-premises Active Directory. So again, that sync is nearly instantaneous and then persisted across all devices and accounts that are linked in with either Active Directory or Azure AD. That's an example in which I know my password. I also want to point out that from Office 365, a user can also reset their password. So up here under the settings pane, there's an option that if I've already authenticated and I know my password is expiring tomorrow, that I can reset my password if I've already authenticated. So in this model, a little bit different, and then I don't have to enter my a second factor. We just enter my old password once, my new password twice. Another use case I want to call out is I've done this for a large school district in the suburbs of Chicago where all of their Mac users actually use this tool to reset their passwords, essentially since they're not domain joined and may not be have access or be in a lab at any point. So they've got about 1,000 Mac users and allows their Mac users to really allow them to persist at access without having to go to a domain joined machine. So that kind of wraps up the identity security portion, and certainly I'll kind of circle back at the end for any questions as well. Let's move on to manage mobile productivity. When we talk about managed mobile productivity, this is really focused on leveraging tools like Intune or Microsoft's mobile device management and mobile application management platform to both enroll devices. Enrollment can mean a multitude of things. It can mean pulling down an Office 365 suite to a mobile device, which if your campus is licensed for Pro Plus for your users or Office 365 E3, means that your users can use Office on their mobile devices. We can also push things like campus Wi-Fi profiles, certificates, VPN profiles, as well as various security policies that you may have enforced as well. This also allows us to enforce data protection, or what's called MAM. So MAM allows us to create a segregation of data between corporate and a local profile. So for instance, if I have, again, my Outlook mobile client open up and I open up a campus email, this allows me to create a barrier between that and the identity within that same app. So if I have a Gmail in the same, my personal Gmail in the same Outlook mobile app as my my campus email, it means that I can actually say, don't allow copy and paste to content within that app. Other MDMs really focus on the concept of containerization. We use the identity within those applications, multiple identities, to be able to enforce protection and controls within that app without having to maintain a separate set of campus applications. Really, really key point to how we control access. This also lights up a scenario for us to be able to leverage what's called conditional access. So for instance, today, if a user goes and grabs a brand new device from the Apple Store and they add the campus email, most cases they're either allowed, they're blocked, or they're quarantined, and then an admin has to remove them. In this model, we can actually inject what's called conditional access into that process and say, hey, on enrollment, allow that user to enter their information, but enforce enrollment before they're allowed access. And this is supported for Exchange Online, Exchange On-Prem if you still have it, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, Dynamics CRM Online, and Skype for Business Online. Essentially means that before a user is even allowed to log into those applications, they get prompted for an enrollment option. So in this model, really ensures that we don't have to, or that we can enforce security on them, and only for enrolled devices in this case. We'll kind of go over into some other scenarios here in just a minute. The example I gave earlier, too, around MAM is really focused here on what's called that multi-identity management policy. So again, within Word, within PowerPoint, within OneDrive, we can have both personal and corporate data, but we're creating that layer of protection between those two. Again, most other vendors are doing this at an application level. Really minimizes the exposure for you. Also, there are scenarios in which you may want to do what's called MAM only, or MAM we, or without enrollment as well. This actually allows you to enforce these types of controls without ever enrolling a device. So if you don't have a use case where you want to manage your students' or faculty's device from like a VPN or Wi-Fi or push applications perspective, we can actually say, when you open up Word, enforce the policy without enrollment. That's something that's very unique to what Microsoft does when you don't need to actually enforce an MDM profile on the device. The other important thing to point out as well is we persist that data protection across different streams. So here you can see when I open up an Outlook email, I can take content in that email to an Excel doc. But if I try to save that to a personal app, we block it. But even if I take that from Excel to Word, so I'm not going Outlook to Word, we then still recognize that as protected content. And even in Word, we don't allow you to save that to OneDrive Personal, but we'll allow you to take that to OneDrive for Business. So what that actually looks like, we're going to take a quick demo break here. We're going to go up to Microsoft's MDM platform. So this is what's called Intune Standalone. If your campus has SCCM deployed as well, Intune can integrate with SCCM, so you truly have a single point of management for all of your campus domain joined PCs, as well as any mobile devices for your faculty or students. So in this model, this is my basic management page. You can see from this perspective, I've got some various devices in various health states. But one, if we want, after we authenticate here, we'll see in a second that I'm pushing various policies such as, how to secure a device, how to manage my user access, how data can move between various applications. Just refresh my screen here. And this is an MDM type model. So in this model, we're really kind of just managing everything as far as how we can control that access. Again, one of the most common examples of being, pushing the Office suite, pushing campus Wi-Fi, pushing certificates for student Wi-Fi and things like that. So it's secured only for domain joined devices. This is important too for campuses that have, like, say, open networks today, where may have drive-by or passerbys that may be leveraging the network for potentially malicious concerns if there's no kind of passkey or anything. In this model, we can actually truly push that type of access. Now, once that device is enrolled, in this case, we can actually go find my user account here, and we'll find my approximately 13 different devices. And I'll show you that, from that perspective, just like any other, traditional MDM, we'll actually see that I can, wipe a device. I can also do what's called a selective wipe. So in this model, let's just say that, a faculty member is no longer, employed by the campus institution. So this model, we can go ahead and selectively wipe the device. In that model, that means that, my personal data would still persist, but that, campus data, the campus email profile, the certificates would go along with that. There's also use cases, obviously, for full wipes. So maybe you have campus iPads, or maybe you have scenarios where there's campus-owned devices. In that model, you could actually fully wipe the device back to factory state as well. As I kind of alluded to earlier, we're also pushing a handful of applications. I'm happen to be pushing, a good majority of the Office platform, the Azure Authenticator app, and you'll see some other applications in here as well. What that means, when my student comes on board for their day one, they enroll their device in Intune, they immediately get all the Office apps on their device. They immediately have access to the content that's relevant to them for, say, Exchange Online, Office 365, etc. And again, you can publish any non-Microsoft apps as well. Anything that's available in the public store can actually be published through these types of policies. And then the last but not least thing I'm going to walk through quickly here is just the types of policies we can push. So again, coming back to a student example, when a student comes on board their first day, they get enrollment instructions. They get the enterprise certificate. They get connected to the campus Wi-Fi, as you can see here, and then they get any email policies or security policies we want to enforce. This allows us to ensure that student's onboarding experience from an IT perspective is seamless. One last thing I should also point out in here as well is as your students are coming in with, say, Windows 10 machines, Windows 10 has this new functionality that allows you to add a work account. That effectively allows students to join their devices to Azure AD as opposed to a traditional domain, which is not typically what most students would do. That's a very simple process in which in Windows 10 they can go to access work or school account. They can choose connect. Now once they connect their Windows 10 PC up to Azure AD, it works very similarly to how I just illustrated with the mobile device scenario. They get the enterprise certificate, they get Office Pro Plus, they get a VPN profile if needed, they get the campus Wi-Fi profile. So again, that becomes a one-step process for the users to be able to come on board. Again, think about today how you do this for your students, and they may have to have the right Wi-Fi names, they may have to go grab the media from the Office 365 portal. This really brings that down into a seamless experience. We actually use this in our enterprise to go from like a 2-hour onboarding process for a new PC to a self-enrollment model where users can now get, anywhere in the U.S. for our offices. They can go log in with a new Windows 10 PC, add their school or work account, and within about 20 to 25 minutes, they'll have a fully installed Office Pro Plus, they'll have an enterprise cert, they'll have VPN, and have Wi-Fi. Again, just speaking to kind of the ease of onboarding, students or, for faculty in your use cases as well. So, and one thing I want to point out too, I'm going to cover this in the end as far as kind of what the overall EMS suite is. I do want to point out as well that, please talk to your Microsoft rep about how EMS is licensed as well, because there's a great program out there for campus agreements that when you do license your faculty members, your students essentially get everything we're talking about today for free. And certainly I will not go into depth in that. You've got folks like Simon, your Microsoft rep, or if you have any other Microsoft reps that can kind of go deeper on that as well. But it's very advantageous for campuses to adopt this from a faculty perspective, because essentially it rolls down to the student populace at no cost. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is kind of data level protection. So in this model specifically, we're going to talk about how we can protect potentially sensitive content. So in this model, maybe I have sensitive documents with student IDs or with student, PHI data. We can leverage tools like Azure Information Protection, which is previously known only as Rights Management Services, or RMS, to protect content no matter where it goes. This allows me to enable safe sharing both internally as well as with external parties, the ability for the users to enforce those controls, or you can identify that automatically. So for instance, if I detect that a social security number is in a document or an email, I may lock that email down so that when the recipient receives it, they can't copy and paste or really do anything but open that email and take a screenshot with their phone. And even we'll talk about kind of how, Azure Information Protection can even watermark that now email or document to ensure that content is now protected even beyond just taking a picture with a camera phone as well. This is done in a handful of different ways. There's both kind of user manual enforced policies, which is good if you have specific use cases around legal or compliance or HR where they know they want to forcefully protect content so the recipients can only do specific actions. The other method in which this is enforced is through automatic classification. So in this model, we can look for the type of content I just talked about, A-band information, so bank routing numbers, social security number, passport IDs, driver's license information, and you can also build just about anything with custom regex. So maybe you have a specific format your student IDs in, and anytime we see a document with that ID in it, we want to mark that as confidential. That is all automated now with the new AIP platform. So again, you may have different use cases based on the type of data you're protecting, but these all help us kind of proactively protect the content. Now, I did walk through Intune MDM a little bit. I'm actually going to quickly just walk through Azure Information Protection. Unfortunately, I upgraded my client last night and broke one function in my client. But I'm going to start by opening up just an email. And what I'll show you in the most basic form is protecting an email from, copy, paste, screenshot, and other types of activities. Sorry, my Outlook client takes a second to load here. What I'm going to do when it opens up is I'm going to generate a new email, and we're going to protect that content with a policy that's been predetermined by my organization. So in this model, we'll start this new email. Up in the top here, the manual type of protection is that I can go up to the Options tab, I can hit Protect, or permissions, sorry, and we'll actually see all the policies that are exposed to me, such as confidential or HR, internal policies. You'll see some different options that are just a part of this. Microsoft has some other various ones that you can build and are scoped to either students or faculty or specific teams or groups within your campus. Now, when I choose a policy like, say, confidential view only, that ensures that specific policy says that when that user receives the content, the password that's in this email or the content that's within this email is automatically going to be, or is going to be protected manually. So I'm going to say my password's 123. So in this case, I can send that email off, and that recipient will only, as long as they have an Office 2013 or 2016 client, Office 2010 is supported with an add-in, automatically within the Office client, they will not be able to do anything but open that email or take a screenshot with their phone, which I'll talk about how that works in just a second. Now, what that actually looks like, and a great example, it's both a good and a bad example, is we're going to go back to my campus email account here in this case, and I'm going to pull up an email that someone else had sent me. Now, because we're demoing over Skype for Business, what's going to happen, I'm just going to point this out. You see this little file here, and this is what that email looks like from a recipient perspective. You get this little icon. Again, no additional add-ins. This is built into Office 2016 in my case. You're going to see that that email is protected. Now, what's going to happen is when I open up this email, you're going to essentially see one large black screen. And just to illustrate what that looks like, I'm going to go back to my desktop here. You'll see my nice dinosaur, and we'll open up just the email content. And you'll see that you guys on the phone will see just a black box, and that's because there is protected content specifically within this email. So you're going to see a black box moving around the screen. That's how deeply we protect the content with AIP in this scenario, down to the operating system layer, which is the big differentiator. The other thing is, no matter where that content goes, so whether it's on a mobile device, whether it goes in the Dropbox or Box, or a user or faculty member takes that home with them, it's all governed by identity. So if you protect that PHI data and someone takes a student list home with them, if they're no longer an employee, they will no longer be able to open up that document. And if you've restricted copy and paste and everything else, they essentially have a list that they can do nothing with. That really allows you to maintain that data security no matter where it goes. And again, whether it goes to Google Drive or an unprotected file share at really any other location than the intended source, it's really going to ensure that is going to be blocked. So again, great example, and sorry I couldn't show you more. Again, my client broke unfortunately last night, so if there's any follow-ups you want to see a demo, we'll schedule something outside of that as well. Last but not least, we'll kind of talk about how EMS is really focused on being a comprehensive solution. We've kind of talked about the user, device, and all the various other sides of protection that EMS offers. When we talk about the platforms being SaaS-based, it's always going to be up to date. Microsoft is, almost on a weekly basis updating various components within Office 365, within EMS. There's a great blog out there for EMS if you want to see the new fun things that are coming out. Again, on almost a weekly cadence, you're seeing things being released to the public. A lot of the things, most of what we talk about also integrates with what you have on premises today. Assuming you're not going to an all-cloud campus, we have the ability to integrate with a lot of the platforms and systems that you still maintain on-prem. And then certainly everything is simple and easy to set up. In these cases, Azure AD is the foundation of a lot of the things we just talked about. If you have Azure AD today or Office 365, you have about 50% of what you need to really get started. The rest of it really is, how do you want to adopt, how do you want to pilot, how do you want to test the various scenarios. The other thing that I'll cover is, Microsoft offers you more for less. When we talk about the EMS platform today, it actually represents behind the scenes about 25 to 30 different solution or features in which we can protect your user and devices. The reason why that's important is because it's one cohesive solution. In most other scenarios, we talk about having to offer solutions from 5, 10, maybe even 15 different vendors. You may have a different identity synchronization tool. You may have a different federation tool. You may have a different MDM tool or DLP or document protection or user abnormality checking. When we talk at most organizations today, they're typically looking at least 3 to 5 other solutions to match what can be done in one SKU with Microsoft today. And again, being an education institution, the pricing you guys receive for this platform is massively lower than what most traditional corporations even pay for that have much higher IT budgets than most institutions. So again, if you're questioning on some of the solutions you have today, if you have any end of life or end of contract discussions around things like MDM or user protection or federation or anything we're really talked about today, MFA, come talk to us about how we can, potentially even shift that cost over to something like the EMS solution. And again, by the time you look at least just 1 to 2 of those components of the 25 or so, it will typically offset or justify the cost of that enterprise mobility and security platform. So we kind of talked across some of the pillars today, but this actually represents all that is enterprise mobility and security. It really falls into 4 platforms. The one really focused on identity and access management. This includes things like Azure AD Premium, where I can do multi-factor authentication, the conditional access, reporting of abnormality in the cloud, password reset. It also offers me the ability to do that privileged identity management, identity protection, so I can look for users coming in from other browsers that we don't trust, or anonymous browsers or botnet infected machines. The second pillar is really focused on the MDM and MAM. The third is really focused on that automatic identity classification, and then the fourth is really kind of our advanced security workloads. On the bottom right one I didn't demo today, but it's really focused on securing on-prem user identity. And the top right one's really focused on agentless SaaS app discovery and governance. So again, the example here that I'll show you in just a second is I can actually create policies in this cloud app security tool, and we can look for different types of abnormal or malicious activity. So this represents the Cloud App Security Dashboard and hooks directly in with Office 365. So one of the things you'll note here is we can actually look for things like externally shared files that have been stale for more than 180 days. We can look for things like impossible travel, mass download by a single user. So we may see that a user's downloaded more than 100 files in 5 minutes and trigger alarms. Without the API type of integration that this tool has with Office 365, you really don't have the ability to track these more type of advanced workloads. Some of the other types of policies that are common within this Cloud App Security tool are things like multiple failed login attempts, something, again, that's not easy to glean off of Office 365. We can also look for things like, files shared with, domains that we don't trust, risky IP addresses. So again, that comes back to the fact that Microsoft has this immense security graph of, 13 to 15 billion authentications per day, and they're looking at a lot of information and really supplying that back into you to be able to proactively protect access to your cloud and on-prem assets. So we'll get back. I think I just got one more slide left here, and we'll take any questions. We're going to make the slide deck available as well, but if you are an Office 365 customer, there are multitudes of benefits for adding enterprise security through EMS to your Office 365 platforms. This slide kind of outlines some of those use cases in which you can add security on top of the basics, and really I will call them basics with Office 365. Also, if you're leveraging Windows 10 for your student populace or your campus, faculty, for instance, there's various methods and ways in which EMS platform really truly makes that a secure platform, and that's really kind of a message that we in Microsoft love to tell together. So I left just about the 5 minutes or so that I intended to have left. I know that we went through a lot of content today. The one thing I really want to highlight here is really how Microsoft has made an extensive focus on really securing your campus and your faculty members, and really using that doing that through the enterprise and mobility security platform. So at this point, I did mention, you've got Simon on the call as well. If you have any questions on any of the, security components or how they can be added to your campus agreements, please reach out to either Simon or, our marketing at Metrics LLC alias, and we'd be happy to help you. At this point, I'll take a quick pause, and if there's any questions, either feel free to tap them in the IM window, or I will unmute the audience as well if I'm able to here. Give everyone just a minute or two here. I'm going to go ahead and unmute the audience, so if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself as well. All right, well, if there's no further questions, we'll go ahead and wrap our Azure 123 series for this week. So again, I want to thank everyone who attended over the course of the last 5 weeks. Look forward to getting feedback on these sessions and seeing if you'd like to hear more from us moving into 2017. So everyone, thank you for attending, and have a great holiday, and see everyone in the new year.